A B D do B D W D D D do B D W do 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 do.
Okay, welcome to St. Werburgh's Church here in the heart of inner city Dublin, and the oldest part of the city within the old medieval walls. There's been a church here since at least the 1100s. So for almost 1,000 years, worship has been offered on this site. The present church in which we're standing was built in 1719. And the story which I'm about to tell is set in 1798, when this church, St. Werburgh's, was the chapel royal for Dublin Castle and the centre of English or British administration in Dublin. The castle is right behind us here at the back, and Christchurch Cathedral and ourselves are set very close to it. As you can see up here at the back, we have the royal blazon of arms, where if the royal family came to visit, it sit, or most normally the Lord Lieutenant and his family and his entourage would all sit up there. It was the church for the powerful and the ascendancy and the elite and those who had control over the country. And that was all soon to change in 1798, in the months of May and June, when this city went into rebellion, in the 1798 rebellion. And this parish church was very much associated with that. Its rector at the time, although the chaplain to the Chapel Royal, was actually a sympathiser with the rebels. And in 1798, Lord Edward Fitzgerald was the most hunted man in the city of Dublin. An award of £1,000 at the time, which was enormous, was offered for his capture. And all around the streets here in St. Werburgh's, he was in hiding. And he was eventually captured on Thomas Street, only a stone's throw away from here, by a man called Major Henry Sir. He had dressed up in the intervening times and apparently travelled around the city of Dublin dressed as a woman, dressed as a pauper. He'd even met his wife in Leinster House and sneaked in dressed as a woman. Leinster House, of course, has now become the home of the Irish Parliament. His family were incredibly important. They were the Dukes of Leinster. So this was no ordinary man, and hence an enormous award for Lord Edward Fitzgerald, the Commander-in-Chief of the United Irishmen. Now, when he was eventually captured and shot by Henry Sir, he was taken here to the castle and interrogated and brought across the Liffey to prison, where a short time later he died. And when he died, the Lord Lieutenant granted that his body could be released immediately for burial, but there was to be no official funeral, nor was it to be announced. So as the city was ravaged with rebellion and fire and the full scale of it, his body was taken here, carried by 6 men. It was stopped many times and eventually arrived into this church at 2 o'clock in the morning. And that night, the rector gave up his right to be buried below the high altar here, to allow Lord Edward to lie, what he thought was temporarily, in that place, where they had planned at a later stage to move him to Kildare, to the family vault where all of the rest of them were buried. So the funeral service happened here with only one mourner, Louisa Connolly, his aunt, and one other pauper who was able to later verify that the funeral had taken place. He was a passer-by and had seen the funeral coming in. So afterwards, the authorities were naturally not terribly impressed with St. Werburgh's association. We were also associated with a couple of other people, including Napper Tandy, and there's a bell in the middle of the aisle here with his name on it. And so this really set about punishing us as a church. We were stripped of our dignity of the Chapel Royal, and a new chapel was built within the walls of Dublin Castle. St. Werburgh's at the time had an enormous tower soaring high above the city of Dublin, which can be seen in all of the old prints of Dublin Castle. Now, the authorities became very suspicious and weary of this, and they were afraid it would be used, perhaps in a further rebellion, by snipers to pick off officials walking through the castle. And so St. Werburgh's Tower was demolished, and the facade we see at present is but the bottom of it. So too, there was a tunnel leading from the castle out of here, for fear that when the castle came under attack, that the inhabitants and the officials there would have a safe exit underneath the castle. And popping up here in our church, that was later filled in because, of course, at the time it never occurred to them that it could be too used the other way around, that the rebellious folk of St. Werburgh's could hop into the tunnel and pop up in the castle and cause more trouble. So that's the story of how this parish church of St. Werburgh's really went from riches to rags, from being one of the wealthiest churches in the city of Dublin, the church of royalty, the church of the ascendancy, and the church of the castle and the chapel royal, to being a church which was later punished and over time became one of the poorest parishes in the city of Dublin.